Hi, everyone. Thank you for connecting. My name is Karan. I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. Thanks for joining us today. And I have with me Melissa. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Ramirez. I'm an immigration consultant working for VanHack. Welcome to the webinar, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for joining us. If you have any questions as we kind of go through the webinar, just throw them into the chat. We're happy to answer. And I think there's a lot of people here today, so we'll try to get to your questions. We also had some questions sent in earlier, so thank you for those who sent some of those in. We'll try to get to them, a few of them as well throughout the webinar. It's obviously an interesting time right now, and there's a lot of information going around regarding, we're all checking our news. We're getting WhatsApp messages from friends and family with different types of information. So I just want to say thank you for joining us here today and taking the time to learn a little bit about immigration. We're trying to do our best to keep on top of the current events and as things develop. And so we just wanted to pass on that knowledge today I think today we have a lot of candidates and a lot of clients and people who are just curious about Canadian immigration and what's going on. So we'll try to make the content as applicable to everybody. And if there are other questions, like I said, just mention them in the chat and we'll go from there. So I think without any further ado, it's probably best to just jump right into it. So I'll just share my screen. Give me one moment. All right, so this is our update to Canadian immigration so far. News is kind of updating pretty quickly, so stay with us. Our agenda for today we're breaking it down into travel restrictions, the ones that were in place, any of the exemptions to those travel exemptions. We're going to kind of focus on global talent stream with LMIA and work permits. And then we'll try to jump into frequently asked questions and then open it up to questions as well. So without any further ado, let's go into travel restrictions. So the Prime Minister, he came out and announced on March 16th that there were going to be travel restrictions imposed with certain exemptions due to the COVID-19 pandemic. With that, essentially moving on to what that kind of entailed was anybody who's asymptomatic and who's a Canadian, a PR, or and some foreign nationals, which Melissa will kind of talk about the exemptions, were able to come to the US by air. So those were not showing symptoms of COVID-19. Those who are showing symptomatic would be those people must enter by land. So that was announced by the Prime Minister on March 16th, which was 10 days ago. Seems like a long time ago now, but just 10 days ago. After that, I think the Canadian government realized that, there are some people who were abroad and their families are here and they have jobs here. And those people were temporary foreign workers. And they know that temporary foreign workers are such an important part of the Canadian economy. So due to that, on March 20th, a few things happened. So one, they allowed temporary foreign workers they allowed some exemptions to the travel restrictions that were imposed. And you'll also notice that the US-Canadian border was closed at that point as well, where it remained open at first. So now it's closed for non-essential travel. You'll notice some acronyms, by the way, that I'll sort of go over, but one of them, if you see temporary foreign workers or foreign nationals, same thing, pretty much anyone who's not a Canadian or permanent resident would fall into those categories. And then more recently, on the 23rd, which was just this past Monday, exemptions for temporary foreign workers were announced. However, effective dates were not confirmed. So currently we are kind of just waiting for an announcement. They said early this week. So, we're refreshing our pages every day and checking with IRCC, which is the Immigration Refugee Canada, Citizenship Canada organization that deals with immigration in Canada. So we're constantly keeping updated with that. We are anticipating an announcement pretty shortly. As we kind of go through, we also, at the end of this webinar, we'll share a document that Melissa and I have created that will keep everyone up to date on the immigration situation going forward. So as we receive news there, just keep checking back with that document and Also, I think I should probably mention, like, it's a really good idea to, like, this is general information. So just as a disclaimer, probably a good idea if you do have further questions about any of this stuff, to discuss it, your specific case, with your immigration consultant or lawyer. So as it sits right now, the travel restrictions are only for Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and some foreign nationals traveling from the US who have been in the US for at least 14 days and are asymptomatic. Only those people can travel to Canada by air at this time. At the same time, announcements have been made, like I said, for temporary foreign workers to come as well. We're just waiting on the details at this time. Maybe we'll go to Melissa to sort of talk about what those exemptions are right now, and from there.
Okay, so thank you, Karen. So yes, the most relevant exemptions effective now are immediate family members of Canadian citizens or of permanent residents, as well as foreign nationals traveling at the invitation of the Canadian government for a purpose related to COVID-19, a person in transit through Canada to another country. So exemptions that will be effective in the following days are temporary foreign workers, as well as international students who have valid permits or who were approved before March 18. Foreign nationals who were approved for permanent residence before March 16. So the Canadian immigration authorities will announce this week, as Karen said, when these exemptions will be in place. We will share as well all the latest news in this document we published this week. So just keep in mind that workers, students, and approved permanent residents should not yet travel. Travel restrictions are still in effect for these groups. Okay, so if you want to see the complete list of the exemptions, you can go also in the immigration website if you want to have more information regarding this. Okay, perfect. So what about the Global Talent Stream program and the labor market impact assessment applications? I know that most of you have questions regarding what is happening now. So the good news are the officers are working remotely. Applications continue to be assessed as usual. So for those who don't know how it works, the Global Talent Stream program, there are two steps to have this process. So for the first step is to apply for the labor market impact assessment. And this document has a validity of 6 months. And the second step is for the temporary foreign worker to apply for the work permit before this time, before the validity of the LMIA. So for the temporary foreign workers that needs a visa, after receiving a work visa and the visa stamped in their passports, the approval letter is valid for 1 year. So even if the temporary worker starts the application, like preparing all the documents, and once they will be approved, they still can come to Canada in 1 year. So this is something that you can also keep in mind. For the temporary foreign workers with an ETA, will need to enter before the expiration of the labor market impact assessment. So yes, as I say, ESD continues to process global talent stream applications as normal. Approved LMIAs will be sent by email, as officers are working remotely and do not have access to mail services. And for those companies and workers that are in Quebec, so the Minister of Immigration is also working remotely. They are accepting applications. You can mail the applications, and they are accepting as well digital signatures.
Perfect. And just to add, with LMIA applications, I think we have some questions coming in as well, which we'll get to. Just with any LMIA application. So the great news is ESDC, so that's Employment and Social Development Canada. They're continuing to do global talent stream applications, which is awesome. The only place that we're finding like they're not able to mail applications because all these officers are working from home, as I'm thinking a lot of you guys are as well. So as people are, so the only thing is they can't send out the LMIA approvals by mail, but I think that's not the worst case because they'll just email it to you, which I think most people prefer anyways. But yeah, so applications, and the great thing is every application that we've sent in has still kind of fallen into that 14-day processing time, which is great. Now, normal LMIA applications, they are being delayed quite extensively, a little bit different, but for global talent stream, we're still following the same processing times and we're still getting approvals. So we're just moving on as business as usual here. Maybe we'll just jump to one question because some questions are coming in. So Shida asked, what happens if someone is on a GTS permit and then they get retrenched? Does the spousal visa get impacted or can they continue to work? Really good question, Shada. I hope I getting your name right. But if somebody, for instance, is on a work permit and what ends up happening is their spouse will come on an open work permit. So if if that person's still in Canada, the spouse would still be able to continue to work regardless of the employment situation of the primary applicant. So that's totally fine. And yeah, and maybe we'll ask, we'll get to one more question. So Brenda asked, I was not able to submit via fax and mailed through Canada Post. Will the application be received and processed? Yeah, they should still be receiving applications by mail. I was able to send, like we usually use a online fax service. So my fax machine is not working and it's hard to buy a new one. So yeah, we are sending applications by online fax and those ones so far have been received. So I would continue to use that method, but from what ESDC has mentioned, they should still be accessing their mail services. Of course, through the mail delay, you'll sort of deal with that. But yeah, hopefully you're able to fix the fax issue. But otherwise, try using an online fax service. Yeah. Okay. So Melissa kind of touched on LMIA applications. I think it's really important to see for now the candidates who are applying for their work permit exactly what steps that they typically go through and what's going on with those. So for work permit applications, there's usually about 3 steps that a candidate is usually going through. The first step, once somebody submitted a work permit application, is to complete biometrics. So this is something that's mandatory as of a year and a half ago. If somebody has come to Canada in the past or applied to come to Canada and have done the biometrics in the past 10 years, they won't need to do this step. So if, like I said, sometimes we have candidates who come to Canada to participate in, if you guys have heard of LEAP events that VanHack holds. So those events, some of those people have had their biometrics completed. So this step would be already completed. For those of you who haven't, the biometrics, so usually they give about 30 days to complete the biometrics. That's been extended to 90 days. Typically when you're going to do your biometrics, you would go to a VAC. So a VAC is a visa application center. Most visa application centers have been closed from the ones that we are getting information from across the world. Each country, though, is dealing with different health measures and assessing it differently. So, for instance, I think Nigeria has just started to sort of see a lot of action and with COVID-19, whereas places like China have sort of said it's been reduced. So visa application centers, for instance, in China are starting to open at a temporary basis, which is great information. So I think that we'll see that trend happening in other countries as the situation continues. And of course, until the governments there feel it's safe to do so. Following up with medical exams. So typically what we do for medical exams is we ask our candidates to apply for the medical exams beforehand. And then once we apply, the medical's already been done. Most medical panel physicians have said now that anybody who's doing a medical exam, you cannot do it up front. It needs to be requested from IRCC. So panel physicians seem to still be accepting appointments. The only requirement is that you have submitted your application, and then what ends up happening is IRCC, and for anyone who forgets, it's Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada, will request that person do their medicals. Once those medicals are requested, the person can book an appointment with a medical physician still and go through that medical exam. And the third step usually for applicants is the passport submission. So once their other applications have other parts of their application have been assessed, usually the visa office in that particular country will request that the candidate send their passport or bring their passport into a local visa application center to get a visa stamp, and that kind of allows entry into Canada. So as we mentioned, most VACs are temporarily closed. However, you are able to submit your passport by mail. So you would just send your passport in, they stamp it, and send it back. It's actually really common practice because not every city in a country will have a visa application center. So it's really common for somebody to send their passport in. So you're still able to submit your passport and get it stamped in that way. So applications, and this is directly from IRCC, applications are still being accepted. They're not being closed. They're not being refused for lack of documentation if anyone's requiring documents. So another example of this would be, this is not from every country, but sometimes IRCC will request somebody to submit like a police certificate, for instance. Those police certificates, if for some reason that maybe is deemed a non-essential service in the country that you're in, you're still able to submit your application and just wait until you're able to get that document, and then you would just send it in afterwards. So like I said, applications are still going on. There are obviously like service disruptions, as we've sort of seen with biometrics and things due to COVID-19, and it can have an impact on processing times. If anybody has used the online portal to see how long your processing time is, that portal is probably by now a little inaccurate. So you wouldn't follow the processing times that are listed there. They may update them as the situation goes on, but I think what's happening right now is the government is dealing with all this really, really quickly and trying to put in a lot of the regulations. Like when something goes into practice, for instance, it's not just a matter of a minister saying, hey, we're allowing temporary foreign workers to come in, and then they just start coming in. The idea is they have to make it into law. And so that part of the act, which does get submitted pretty quickly, it does take some time to draft that work. So that's kind of what we're waiting on right now to get further details. I think it might be good to just check in with the questions that have been asked. So let's go maybe through a work permit question. Or let's go with Sean. So Sean asks, my candidate is holding a visitor visa in Canada. I want to support him with a global talent stream as an employer. Does he need to be physically outside of Canada to apply once he gets the LMIA to apply for his work permit? So good question. Basically, I think what Sean is asking here is typically there's a global talent stream application. It's a 14-day application at processing time, and typically the work permit would take another 14 days. That 14-day processing time is only for applications that are submitted from outside of Canada. So you're looking at anywhere outside of Canada is normally okay. But if the person is inside of Canada, it's just regular processing time you'd fall onto, which is still fine. I think right now, and again, these processing times can be disrupted, so I won't even quote processing times, but it would be inside of Canada, so it wouldn't be eligible for regular 14-day processing. At least at this time, again, with this situation, because I think, people being abroad, it may change, but as of right now, that's kind of, that's the most recent information. Maybe one more question. We just received an approval LMIA before COVID-19 and in the process of finalizing the work permit. Are they still approving work permits? Yeah, work permits are still being approved. We've had a couple of cases last week where work permits were approved. And I think as Melissa mentioned in the last slide, typically when somebody gets approval for a work permit, they have 1 year to enter Canada. So they'll be given a work permit authorization letter, and their work permit won't, you may have applied for a global talent stream work permit, and you were told that it's going to be a 2-year length. That 2-year length is the same. So you'd still have 2 years, but that 2 years would initiate once the candidate does land in Canada. So I hope that answers your question. So the 2 years would start once they land in Canada, and they have 1 year typically to do that. Hopefully that answers your question, Sarah. Melissa, do you have any other answers to those questions, or everything's okay?
So Q asked as well, I submitted my application on March 5th and collected biometrics on March 10th. Should I be worried about the delay from IRCC? GTS application LMIA, I was expecting getting an answer last week. So, well, actually, as Karen said, so yes, we are expecting some delays, but at the same time, the immigration authorities are working very hard just to trying to respect these processing times. Yes, the situation is an extraordinary situation. So yes, just be flexible and expect some delays in this type of applications.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right, and I think it's probably good to also acknowledge that there's a lot of uncertainty with all this. You've probably heard the word unprecedented, an unprecedented amount of times, and so I think a lot of people kind of ask, they want to know specific timelines for things. And right now it's, we are also waiting. It's nice that IRCC has said that they're coming out with these exemptions really shortly, and that they will apply to temporary foreign workers, because again, there's such a huge part of our Canadian economy. So we're just waiting to hear news. And as soon as we do, we'll pass that information on, which again, should have been this week. At the same time, there's things that we can do. And so similarly, in uncertain times, we may not be able to say, coronavirus stop that, but we do what we can as told by the Canadian government, right? So in our own personal examples, we would be, washing our hands, we would, stay home. And so the same way, what we can do is what we can control. And I think it's our job to sort of take control of, what we have our hands on. So for instance, the next question is just what can we do at this time? So for a lot of you who are, working remote, I think that's a really great option for people right now. If you have, if you have staffing needs, you have people who are, you have projects going on, you're looking to hire, take these people on remote. You're all working remote as well, hopefully. And, we have, if you're not sure how to onboard, or you have questions about, what this process looks like, you can look out to your resources. We do have an onboarding webinar that's also going to be put on a little later to sort of say, what remote onboarding even looks like. And then for people who are coming in, who are your employees, when they do arrive, when these announcements do come through, and the exemptions are made for temporary foreign workers, as they start to enter Canada, just make sure that everyone is self-isolating, doing their mandatory part. So I think also just today it goes into effect that anybody who is coming from outside of Canada, it's mandatory for them to self-isolate now, whereas before it was just a requested thing. So that's something to push. We can also prepare our applications. I think the main thing is get your documents in order, get everything that you can do, because people are still working, and there are a lot of things that, there's a lot of steps, as you guys know, with any immigration application. There's a few things to get your ducks in order. So we can do that part, and we can still send in applications. They're still being assessed. Luckily, the immigration stuff hasn't really shut down. We're still going forward, just with slighter delays. So that's kind of what we're seeing. And then also what we can do is to stay informed. I think everyone's already eagerly doing that. I would say WhatsApp is probably not the best source, but still, it's great that information is being spread. And we'll continue, like I said, to update that government document that we were talking about. Check the immigration websites, and ask your local immigration consultant or lawyer, we're always happy to answer and update you guys on what's going on if you're curious, because I think we are literally hitting refresh on our web pages every moment, just waiting for this announcement to come through. So feel free to check with us and check out other webinars, and just monitor all these temporary restrictions that are going on, because they are temporary and they will pass. And I can't speak to what's going on in the global scale, but these things will kind of, at least from an immigration standpoint, they're all temporary. So we're just waiting for updates right now. Maybe we'll ask another question here to Melissa. Melissa, why don't I ask you, can I go to the border to receive my work permit? So these are some of the questions that were asked before. So.
Okay. So yes, can I go to the border to receive my work permit? This is a very important question. So no, please avoid the flagpole. You can go to the border to receive your work permit at this time, as this is considered non-essential. You should apply online before the expiration of the temporary permit to receive your employee status. So what it means, employee status, it means that the temporary foreign worker is allowed to work until a decision is made. So this person needs to wait for this decision inside Canada. I don't know if you have any questions regarding the employee status.
Oh, sorry, were you asking for the employee status part?
No, yes, I just want to know if someone in the audience has some questions regarding employee status. No, I think that no, we don't have questions regarding this subject, but actually I would like to jump in another question, Karen, and maybe you can also help a little bit in this. So Brenda asked, remote work, will the candidate have to invoice the company if the GTS LMIA has not yet been processed? So like we are actually like we have some couple of clients that they are signing some agreements with the temporary foreign worker outside Canada. So for this temporary remote work, and yes, they will be able to pay the temporary foreign worker, and there are some options to pay the employees. Maybe we can also share some information regarding these options on how to pay the temporary foreign worker outside Canada.
Perfect. Maybe there's a lot of questions coming in, which I'm really happy to get to. We'll just get through a couple of these questions here that we have, and then we can kind of go through the questions that everyone's asking. So Melissa, if an employee with a global talent stream work permit is temporarily laid off due to COVID-19, can they legally stay in Canada or do they have to leave?
So the temporary foreign worker can stay in Canada as long as the work permit is valid. If they have a closed work permit, they can't work. If the temporary foreign worker wants to work for another employer, they must apply for a new work permit and go through all these process, the LMIA application, and then the work permit application as well. So Karen, maybe you can help us with this question. Once they open the borders again for foreign workers, will the government ask for new medical exams or any COVID-19 exams before entering the country?
Great question, Melissa. No. So at this point, no. The current instructions are for anyone who's entering the country is to mandatory self-isolate for 14 days. That's kind of the most updated information we have right now. So that applies to Canadians, PRs, and temporary foreign workers. And I think it's probably good. Let's just hit some of these questions that people are asking because, it's obviously a really important topic and everyone's situation is going to be a little bit different as well. So we'll try to get to all of them. But why don't we ask this one? So I think you already asked this from Brenda about the invoicing. Charlene asks, let's see, to be clear, if we do an immigration application, it will be processed but delayed, and people will still be able to travel to Canada and then have to self-quarantine. So yeah, most applications are still being processed, you know, and there might be some delays. When they're able to travel to Canada, they will have to self-quarantine, yes. So you, again, still ask them to do remote work in that time frame. There's another step actually for the work permit, which is typically a SIN number. But even those, like although Service Canada locations are closed, you know, someone can still submit their things by mail. Again, this would be after the case once the restrictions are lifted, which we do expect to happen really shortly. There's another question here where, you know, I think is a really, really good question. If a temporary foreign worker gets, this is from Taryn, if a temporary foreign worker gets laid off and are they able to receive EI and government support? They currently pay into EI. You know, it's a really, really good question, and it's one that's really close to my heart because, you know, the whole idea of us, like at least for myself, getting into immigration is to help temporary foreign workers. There's a lot of, there's sometimes a lack of support, and with this, like, usually you're right, temporary foreign workers, they do pay into EI and they could go through the regular EI streams. You may have noticed that the Canadian government has recently put in a couple of new, you know, fast-tracked EI. I think they're coming to an effect, but with most of those, they are specifically, as of right now, triggered only to Canadians. And I think it's a real lack in, you know, an ability, because I think at the last figures were 2 years ago, there's about at least 338,000 temporary foreign workers in Canada. And, you know, some of them, you know, are going through the same issues that Canadians are. And so, you know, I think they're prioritizing right now Canadians for the EI. You know, I don't want to get too political, but I really do hope that that's opened up to temporary foreign workers as well. But really good question. Any other questions that you see on there, Melissa, that you sort of want to go over?
I think that we answer the most important questions. We will also keep other questions. If you want to email us, you can send us your question as well, and we will publish in our Google document with all the questions and the answers, so you can also refer to this document.
Perfect. And we'll keep asking questions, you know, like answering questions as they sort of come through. I also want to tell you guys about a few initiatives that we're taking to help our customers get through this. Many of you have kind of asked about remote work already and remote hiring. You know, we're really happy to announce that we're having our first virtual hiring fair. I think this is, you know, a lot of people have talked about this a lot within VanHack and doing this, because, you know, sometimes people aren't able to come to Canada to meet because of, you know, their own visa restrictions, but we're doing a virtual hiring fair. It's going to be on the 25th and 26th of April. You'll be able to interview more than like 200 senior developers, and you can do that all from home. More details on the website and that you see there. You can also, you know, we'll keep updating you with these links. The CEO is also Ilya. He'll be hosting 2 live webinars. He's been running a remote-only company for about 5 years now. So we all have been remotely onboarded and you know, work remotely. And so he's a great resource to hear from with all this remote stuff. And you know, if you're still looking to hire remote, I think it's a great, you know, it's really important to get as much information as possible on it. So he's having 2 webinars. So with remote onboarding and remote hiring and relocation. If anybody's interested, you can click on the links in the slides and register. We're sending these slides to you afterwards, so you can go through those. And so yeah, he'll be answering all these questions live, just like we're doing here. And another really good way to stay informed is going to be that guide that I mentioned. So this is our update to Canadian immigration. We'll continue to update this guide as information comes out from IRCC. And so we'll keep updating it. You'll be able to see that guide once we send you the slides after this webinar. that pretty much concludes it from our end. I think we'll just go through some of the other questions, and feel free to keep sending them to us, because we'll get through here with a few more. So Joe asks, and this one's kind of a specific question to your case. It might, let's take a look. So Joe asks, I'm applying for a global talent stream for my employee, and the work hours is 30 hours a week, which is the minimum requirement to qualify for a global talent stream as a full-time job, which is true. The wage is also $33.65, right at the wage floor. Is that going to be a problem? You'd want to consult. I'd say that because this is specific, you probably want to consult your local, your immigration consultant or lawyer. But typically with Global Talent Stream, it's the median wage in your city that is applicable. So you'd want to use the job bank website, find the city and the occupation that you're applying under, and specifically to that wage, you'd want to look at the median wage floor. So not the minimum wage, but the median. As long as it's above that hourly wage, you're totally fine. And it's okay that it's just 30 hours and that same wage floor. So good question. So Sam asked, if foreign workers are coming in and required to self-isolate for 2 weeks, where are they supposed to stay? I imagine Airbnbs and hotels may be hesitant to house them. It's a really good question as well, and I think that will be developing as people start to come in. I think they'll still be looking for rental spots as well. We do often have like a relocation coordinator that we work with here at VanHack as well. There's companies out there like Rent It Furnished, that we usually send to companies or candidates to get a better understanding of where to house. I'm not sure about the Airbnb situation, what that'll look like, and hotels. I'm not sure if they'll be just happy with the business or if they would prefer that person self-isolate elsewhere. But we'll sort of see how that continues. But it's a good question, Sam.
Karen, I think that we are not hearing you. Maybe you're on mute. Yes. Okay, so we are not hearing Karen. Okay, so let me just jump in the... Okay, so he will leave the room and he will come back. Okay, so just to like quick questions that we have also here. So Kavya is asking us if this video will be recorded and sent out. Yes, this video will be recorded and it will be available in YouTube as well and in our website.
Am I audible now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I'm sure everyone missed me deeply. I think the question that I was asking before was just from Sarah here. So when work permit is approved, will the foreign worker be able to start working remotely given the travel restrictions? I'm not sure if my question, the answer came through, but it's a really good question. Remote workers are not restricted by work permits. So if somebody's working remotely from the country that they're in, you typically want to have them on a remote contract as opposed to as an employee. because they don't have the proper authorization to be an employee yet, but they can work as a remote contractor. You'd want to have a separate contract for this, and not pay them in a Canadian bank account for their own work permit to stay, that they're legally able to not work in Canada yet. But yeah, it may be a good idea to attend that webinar as well. I think that Ilya is putting on. I think it'll give a lot of information. Let's see here. Jane asked, maybe I'll pose this to you, Melissa. If a temporary foreign worker is laid off but has applied for their permanent residency through sponsorship by their company, will the PR application be affected?
Okay, so for this type of cases, if you can just put on mute now, because I think Karen. Cool. So yes, for this question, well, it depends in which type of application are you applying for PR. They are a different type of applications, and what is important is just to understand, like, each province has their own regulations. So maybe we can take this question, Jen. You can email us with more details. So where this PR, in which type, in which province are you applying? So because something that I would like just to remark is that immigration understands this situation. They like, in general, in all the provinces, they understand that this is as I say, like, a extraordinary situation. So they will be flexible in this type of cases, but this will depend in each province. But for sure that we can help you with these questions, but we will need just to have more details, Jane, in which province, so we can complete our answer.
Cool. Another question asked by Sam, which is a good clarifying question. Does not being able to go to the border to receive your work permit also apply to getting it at the airport? Maybe I'll pose that to Melissa. So
yes, it will be the same, actually. Well, this situation will be, we don't have any news yet in the instructions on how they will proceed with the temporary foreign workers. So as for now, Sam, yes, like, they cannot go to the airport, like this will be just restricted as well. So my suggestion is just to wait for the next news that we will receive, hopefully today or tomorrow, with the instructions on how the government will proceed in these cases.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to assume that once the restrictions are lifted and people start coming to Canada, of course they'll be issued like work permits at the border. Whether those restrictions will then be at they'll be at the airport. That's where typically you'd be issued the work permit. What we're not aware of is if you can do it at the border. So for those of you who don't know, typically there are CBSA, so Canadian Border Officers, at airports and at borders. So somebody might, from Vancouver, go to the local border and get their do what's called a flagpole and get their work permit there. That is you're not able to do that right now. It might change, but that part we're not sure of. But as these restrictions are lifted, it's we would assume that when you come into the country at the airport, they would issue those work permits. But stay tuned, because it's not something that we're 100% sure of just yet. Charlene asked, how can you hire someone for a Canadian company and have them work remotely in their country? Do you want to take that, Melissa? It might just be me, but I can't hear you.
Sorry. Now it's me. So yes, well, actually, you can hire a temporary foreign worker outside Canada. And as Karen said, well, you just need to pay, not in the Canadian bank. It needs to be outside Canada, the payment as well. And also, Okay, so and yes, like what we are suggesting our clients in this moment is like you can start working remotely, like the temporary foreign worker can start working remotely outside Canada. And in the meantime, we are preparing the applications and we are applying for LMIAs, waiting for the work permits. So this is a very good strategy now that things are a little bit delayed. So it's important to just understand that yes, you can do that as long as the payment will go outside Canada.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think same thing. I think if you're curious about it, like definitely check in with some of those webinars, because I think Yili would be a really good resource to go to for any of remote working and onboarding and how to do all that, because as we're all moving remote, there's definitely room for us to understand this process, and it'll make us better in the long run. So as information comes in, we'll still keep updating that document for everyone. And we're really happy that everybody was able to take the time out of your very busy days to join us and get more information about what's happening with Canadian immigration. I just wish you all the best. Keep up to date, and if there's anything, please keep in touch with us. We can reach us at our emails. It's Karan at VanHack and Melissa at VanHack.
Thank you very much for your time, and we are here to help you. Please send us all your questions through our emails. Thank you very much.